Welcome to the FMCG Guys podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Torres, accompanied by my co-host and, of course, host with a capital H, Christina Nicolaou. Hi, Christina.
Hi, Daniel. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Sometimes I say co-host, sometimes I say host.
I respond to both. Don't worry about it.
Okay. We maybe I should come up with an actual solid intro for this. So great to see you today and excited about the conversation we're gonna have. What are your thoughts on transition? So obviously you've changed from P&G to Diageo, now again to Coca-Cola. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, actually, my first big transition was changing from architecture to the FMCG industry. So I would say, I'm kind of big on transitions. It feels like these are moments in time where it's kind of a check on yourself. You take some time to reflect, see how far you've gone, what you've learned, what you need to unlearn. And that's kind of the most difficult part sometimes, as well as a check on your different cycles of people around you, right? New people and new behaviors, a network that is expanding, and you understand which relationships are most valuable and how you can be most valuable to those relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, my personal big transition was going from having a solid paycheck to having none and having to make my own business to have a salary. That was a big learning curve. And of course, there's a lot I wish I'd known back then, right?
But you're thriving on uncertainty. So definitely a good skill set that you've developed.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I guess it's a bit too much. But too much uncertainty makes you float. So today our guest is Akanksha Bindal. She's heading up the international business for Pernod Ricard India, which, just to clarify, that means selling the company's portfolio in India to other markets. So mainly to Indian expats that live in other markets, bringing the brands that Pernod Ricard owns in India to those markets. What are you expecting from this conversation, Christina?
I expect this to be a very interesting conversation. Even with her current role, Akanksha has to deal with a lot of different things. Knowing a little bit about the alcohol industry and how complex it is, I cannot imagine what dealing with international experts would be like. And as well, she has had a lot of experience, right? She's been around a long time in the FMCG industry. She's had a lot of changes within P&G, so yet another alumni for me here. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing what she has to say.
Thank you for inviting me to this podcast today. Let me share a bit about myself. I come with FMCG experience of roughly 18 years. Started long time back in P&G. It seems like ages now in India. But currently, I'm working with Pernod Ricard India. I'm currently heading international business for them. We have a portfolio of Indian brands under Seagram's, and we are responsible for building this portfolio globally.
It's amazing having you here, Akanksha, and thanks for that intro. Let's dial back a little bit. As you said, you started your career in P&G, and it feels like we keep getting P&G alumni in the podcast lately, indeed. Can you share with us a little bit about the progression of your career there, and how do you feel that your experiences at P&G influence where you are today?
Definitely. I think I've spent 16 amazing years with P&G, so I can keep going on and I can keep talking about it. Let me share a bit more because I think my experience was a bit different in few ways. I started in sales in India at a time when there were barely any women in sales in India. Yeah. The trade environment in India is more high frequency stores, and hence, typically the go-to market is also a bit more distributor model. The combination of, I would say, the challenging trade environment, a bit more male-dominated organization structures, and also, sales always involves location changes, typically made it tougher for women to opt for this kind of a function. Yeah. So as a fresh graduate, because I started, fresh, my first company was P&G. adjusting into this new environment made me adapt myself a lot. I can tell you stories from changing the clothing to ways of talking to ways of walking. Everything really changed for me. But yes, I do cherish my time at P&G, especially those initial years, I would say. The hands-on learning experience where you truly understand how commercial as a function works. I think that's what I got it, from these initial years. We would go from store to store, selling our products, our schemes, our new innovations. It really helped me carve out an understanding of the commercial designs. Yeah. And, I think we talk it all the time, but P&G is like a university in itself. And I think all this learning I got through my journey in P&G in those initial years. Of course, over the course of the years, I got multiple opportunities to work on different countries, build more on the strategy side from a longer term perspective, and of course also lead commercial teams in countries. So all in all, good experiences. It developed over a course of period of time, and I really cherish that time with P&G.
There are times I feel when I encounter P&G alumni at work, because, in both Diageo and Coca-Cola, you would find people, suddenly it clicks, like you speak a bit of the same language. And you can understand each other in kind of a different way because of those foundations that you talked about, really, how to find the reason to believe in your brands, your products, how to grow the category and take customer first. So, yeah, it always feels a little bit like home.
Yeah.
I can say there's definitely a P&G lingo because I've recruited a lot of P&G people during my career. And whenever I speak with a P&G or a former P&G, they say, oh, it looks like you even work for P&G. You speak the same language as us. You know so much about P&G, like band 1, band 2, band 3, band 4, rated 1. These typical P&G lingos.
Yeah, I actually thought I'm trying hard to make it the typical industry lingo, not the P&G lingo. But yes, you can't take it completely out of your DNA. So that never happens.
No, and it would be a shame to an extent. Actually, you were referring to different stories that you could explain from your initial time at P&G in India. Maybe you can tell us a couple of you. We have time.
Oh, okay, sure. I think, maybe the initial ones are the ones which shape you a little bit more. Of course, I think I will. If I step back, I think maybe there are a few things I'll do a little bit more differently now. But yeah, in initial years, the first time when you step in and you're going into this trade environment, as I mentioned, it's high frequency stores. You're working with retailers who are either, they're not concerned. They have so many FMCG companies visiting them on a daily basis, including managers, etc. So for them, it's like an everyday life. However, for them to see a woman in that scenario versus a typical male-dominated environment, as I mentioned, existed in India at that time. That's something that definitely stands out. Also, I don't know how much you understand, but in India, we would also have these big wholesalers. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And in my first year, I was working in a market which was, I would say it's one of the bigger wholesale markets in India. And, if you're going in that kind of an environment where typically there, again, you wouldn't see a woman there. You wouldn't. You'll just see male buyers, male sellers, male wholesalers, everything male-dominated environment. So for them, I think, it's something that they are also trying to adjust to at that particular point of time. And as a new person to the industry, you are also trying to adapt yourself to some extent. Definitely, it did make a big difference to my clothing. The clothing became, I would say, more covered, if I may say. And also, I think they also take time to adapt and do conversations with you, because initially they would expect that, a woman in this environment might not know so much about the business. But yeah, over a period of time, I think you can cross all these barriers.
Yeah. How did you manage then to go from these local India roles to go international within P&G? Because I know that obviously you need to be rated 1 to do that for starters. But secondly, how was that experience? How did that come along, and how was the experience of getting out of the comfort zone?
Yes, definitely. I think moving internationally was a very different experience for me. First of all, I moved into Singapore, which is a regional headquarters for us in Asia. And this was my first regional experience. Working in a country versus working in a region is extremely different. Yeah. So from a place where you are in control, from design to execution, you have your team who is leading the entire set of work, to a role where no one really directly reports into you. You know, that's typically true in the regional structure. Yeah. You have to get work done via influencing others. Even if you have a team, the work is still done via influencing. You might have a great idea or a strategy, but you have to bring it together. You have to bring everyone together on that plan, ensure that it fits into the larger business objective, and then only you can move forward. Yeah. So again, I have a lot of interesting experiences on this one also. It was a learning journey for me. I personally learned a lot about adapting to a new environment, new culture, very different working styles, because every country is unique, every country is different. So yeah, I think that one has really, my international experience has really carved my working style and personality over the course of the years.
Akanksha, I find this very interesting. You used for the second time, let's say in our podcast, the word adapt. So it feels like in your life you have had some major transitions, right? From being a student to going into a corporate world, and specifically in a field that's quite male-dominated, as you said. And yes. Then from the moment where you start to feel a bit, let's say, more comfortable, they're moving into that international environment where you have to be able to influence people, work cross-functionally. So in terms of pinpointing those transitions that seem to have a significant impact in your life, how important do you think the transitions are in shaping one's career?
Oh, wow. Christina, that's a very, very good question. I'll share my perspective, but I'm also happy to hear your experience on this, because I'm sure between you and Daniel, you also have a lot to share. I believe the transitions, serve as a challenge, and they provide a great personal growth opportunity. That's what I have, concluded over the course of the years. Yeah. So in my case, I would say these transitions gave me an opportunity to accelerate my learning curve, which I haven't seen happening otherwise. I wouldn't have got the same kind of learning curve if I wouldn't have taken these, different assignments. So I think in my case, I would say these are extremely important. Maybe I'll give you a bit more perspective on why I think this is very important in today's business world. Yeah. Earlier, the business roles we were in, even to some extent when I started out, they used to be more unidimensional, kind of, People will spend years in one function and they will just develop expertise within that function, say a commercial or a marketing or a finance. I would say nowadays, the more I see, that's no longer the case. The business models have become much more multidimensional. And this is also because of the existence of a lot of different models that exist. For example, the existence of intermediaries, aggregators, new channels like e-commerce, etc. Right? I think you guys do a lot of work there. Companies are realizing more and more that there is growth to be unlocked if you partner with a certain specialist in a certain segment, say a pharmacy or an e-commerce again, or for last mile delivery. Yeah. So earlier, while there was a need to have an expertise in a particular function, today there is a much larger need for functional experts combined with a bit more holistic understanding across all functions. And that's how I see an overall transition happening. And that's also the reason why I believe this learning and transition is extremely critical for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Within that more multidimensional aspect of a career? Did it make a big difference for you personally, for example, to leave P&G, which was your first company, to another one, for example? Must have been eye-opening as well in a lot of aspects.
Definitely, Daniel, definitely. I think this one is something that I still get a question every time I interact with somebody, like for the first time. Personally, I would say this one was one of my biggest challenges. I have never known an organization outside P&G. I was there for 16 years and that's where I started out, right?
Yeah.
It's not as easy to make this kind of a transition. So whether you look at products or business processes or ways of working or the organization, every single thing is different. Yeah. So being a restricted category as well, Alcobev specifically, where I am right now, even the business dynamics and how it is navigated in different countries is unique, So again, this is very, very different from an FMCG environment because I also worked in FMCG in a regional role. So I have seen multi-country models. However, in an FMCG, especially for P&G, I can say it's a bit true that, there is a certain level of consistency across countries as well, which doesn't exist in Alcobev. So this, for me, personally, was the biggest transition and a big mental challenge as well. Maybe I'll add on a bit on the organization side. So for our industry, we typically have a mix of veterans in the industry. And now you will see there are a lot of these new people in the industry who are from, in general, FMCG background. Yeah. What worked for me was my approach, which is, I focused on getting to know people. Unlike my previous experiences, I do not know these people and they don't have a background on me. Yeah. So knowing each person at an individual level, that really played an important role for me. I do believe I share a personal connection with the person I interact with. So this allowed me really to understand and learn from their own experiences as well. And that's how I think I was able to navigate this transition better.
When I also moved from P&G to Diageo, I think it was kind of two parts for me that were shocking. One was the actual company, right? Because things are very much set in stone in P&G. You learn one way of doing things and it works.
Exactly.
But it was also the industry because suddenly, it was a bit more fun than detergents, alcohol, I have to admit that. But then you have to unlock this full new world of on-premise, which I knew nothing about, right? And it was during COVID, so I had to figure out what do bartenders know and how do you communicate with this side of the world. And I would say people would call me a P&G machine because for the off-premise and the supermarkets, it was very straightforward. I knew that world. But when it came to having those discussions, I remember feeling so conserved compared to speaking about the categories in hypermarkets, right? So I'm wondering, do you have any kind of vivid moments as well in your head where you felt like, oh my God, I'm in a different world and this is a big transition?
Oh, yeah. I think, so many moments come to my mind, Christina, on this one. But maybe one I can mention for sure is because, as I told you, I look after international business. We have operations across multiple countries. Now, the moment I started getting into each of these business models, it's extremely different. The taxation laws are different. The advertising laws are different. This is a restricted category depending upon the market. There are dark markets, semi-dark market, and of course, typical open markets as well. The go-to-market design, very, very unique depending upon the market. It's not as structured the way that you can possibly do in an FMCG. And it's also because of the fact that each individual market has its own nuances, it has its own challenges, and that's what, determines that what is the business model that exists there. So yes, I think initially, to get to really understand those differences, to figure out that, okay, then how and where can I make an influence? It took its own time.
Yeah, completely different market landscape, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. And thinking of, I know that you give a lot of importance to this aspect of transitions. now that you have some perspective on the topic, I know that you have a certain booklet to prepare for transitions. I think it would be great for you to share it for other people that are getting ready for a transition. And maybe it would also be useful to define what a transition is even at the beginning.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a big scope of question, Daniel.
We can break it down.
Yeah.
What is a trend? What do you consider to be a transition?
I think that nowadays is very fluid to some extent, because I think we are always transitioning nowadays, is what I believe in. Literally, even when I was in P&G and in my current organization as well, I would say that we are transitioning every 2 to 3 years in one way or the other. Yeah. So for me, transition could be, like the typically easy to recognize ones, like moving a role within the same company, moving a level up, moving internationally, moving to another company. These are all transitions which I believe are a little bit more easily recognized. But then I would also say there's another aspect of transition which is going on a continuous basis, which is essentially organizations are transitioning. The way they are looking at their business or what they expect out of that business is transitioning. So while, you might be in the same role, you might be in the same place, there is a certain transition which is going on, and hence how fast you catch on to that bus makes a lot of difference. So, that's my take on transition. I don't know if it fills your definition, but that's my
And why do you think it's especially relevant today?
I think for the same reason as I mentioned. One, of course, the business models that used to exist years back, it's not at all the same. This is a different world. Every day there's something new coming up. There's a unicorn in one part of the world who is just changing the game. So that's one of the reasons why everything changes so fast today, that the relative importance of this transition becomes quite a lot. Also, I think the other big part is also we are in this VUCA world. This is, again, very standard. You would have heard it so many times, but that's also something that makes this transition extremely critical.
Mm-hmm. And then we were also talking about like the different tips that you have for transitions. How would you boil them down?
Yeah, definitely. I think this one, I can share a bit from my experience. So as I mentioned, transition could be of multiple different kinds in my mind. But sharing a little bit from my own transitions, I would say there are a few elements of a transition which hold a bit more value for me. One of that aspect, which I have mentioned earlier also, is that I prefer that I start with the people that I'm going to work with. Yeah. That's also a little bit closer to my leadership style. Because, I want to make sure that first you start by getting to know the people, building that trust level before you get onto the business. A lot of time, it's very easy to think that transition is about a new role or a new location. No, it's about a new set of people is how I look at it, right? And that's where my key take on this one is start with the people, because at the end of the day, that's the most important part of it. So that's one for sure. The second one, which definitely has been my learning as I moved out of P&G, is a bit on losing the baggage very quickly. And I'll tell you a bit more on this. Maybe Christina has also heard about this a bit more earlier. It's said that, once you move out of P&G, your first transition, you'll find it to be extremely difficult. It's only when you move to the second company you'll be able to adjust. So many people have come and told this to me earlier, while I was doing my transition at that stage. But I think this is something that I again picked up, and I didn't want to make that mistake. Whether it is in context of an old role or an earlier company, I really believe that, lose the baggage. It really helps you move ahead much faster. Just to give another example on this one. So everyone knows P&G is very structured, right? If you enter another company and you are expecting the same level of structure and processes for every single thing, you won't get it. and then you will be disappointed. So, to begin with, don't expect it. It won't be there. Or it might not be similar. It might not be needed as well. P&G works on a certain model, the other company might not, right? So it really worked for me as I moved into Pernod Ricard. So that's another one. I think the third one I'll mention is what is the unique value I bring to the table, So yes, you've made a shift, but knowing how you fit into this new structure, that makes a lot of difference. And what is the value that you will bring? It also helps you in identifying those early wins, if I may say. Yeah. So I think these are 2-3 things for sure. Maybe one last I will mention, which is something I have learned in Pernod Ricard. So this is my new learning, which is make a new connection every day. Even if I remember from my past P&G experience, but definitely so in my current experience, I can share with you. I've never had an instance that you try to reach out to somebody, you try to learn about something new, and you don't get a response. People always respond. So just that reaching out, it opens up these new avenues for you. It gives you that broader perspective. It helps you learn faster, especially when you are coming from a different environment. It helps in all ways, I guess.
Network, definitely.
Yes.
I second that, and I do believe that it's also way easier to start solving things because for sure you cannot solve them on your own when you're new there. And all you need to do is to find out who's the right person to ask or who might direct me to the right person, right?
Yes.
So 4 tips we have here from Akanksha, which is start with the people, lose the baggage very quickly. What is my unique selling proposition, I would say, and then make a new connection every day. So we'll start with the people, we close with the people. I love that. And Akanksha, you mentioned, as we were discussing before, that transitions also happen without you understanding them because organizations change, things evolve for sure. And when you look back, when you started your career versus now, for sure there have been some huge shifts.
Yeah.
So let's forget about the transition and see where we started and where we are now. If you were to highlight, I don't know, like top 3 things that are different, what would that be, in your opinion?
I think this one is a bit more tougher, maybe. But I think I mentioned one of it earlier, Christina, which is, the way people look at the role or what is required of the role has changed. From that specific expertise that you require within a particular function to a bit more multifunctional understanding with a bit, of course, you still need an expertise in a particular field, but a bit more multifunctional understanding, that is definitely a shift I see. And it's not a shift only at the higher levels. It's a shift actually which is required at every level, more or less every level. It does make the work much easier. It makes sure that you can understand people much better and things can progress much faster because you have a bit more holistic understanding of other functions. So this, for one, for sure, I would say is something that has undergone a change. I think the other aspect I would say is the entire organization. I sometimes feel a bit old in that context. Organization nowadays, or the youngsters, they are so sure of themselves. They really don't, they look up to the seniors, but at the same time, they are very comfortable to carve out their own niche. That's how I'll put it. And they are ready to take risk, which maybe, that 20 years back, we were not in a position to take, or we were not so comfortable to take. So again, the kind of people you're working with has undergone a sea change. And these are a couple of big things that come to my mind.
And can I ask something very specific?
Please.
Let's say we have now a young woman listening who's finishing university in India. Should she go into FMCG sales? Do you think it's going to be the same situation pretty much as when you were young?
Tough question, Christina. Somewhat,
Wow.
yes. Yeah, this one is really tough. Somewhat yes, but somewhat no. I think again, because, these people come with a different mindset only. That's what at least I have seen,
Yeah, your experience.
Yeah, so I think they are surer of themselves. As I told you, I went through a lot of adaptation when I entered this kind of a function in FMCG, right? I don't think the younger lot will go through the adaptation. They will go with what they believe in. They will go into it a bit more informed, definitely better informed. Google is there for that. So definitely better informed, better prepared. They know what it takes. Actually, just yesterday, I was actually recruiting for commercial function, somebody for our company, right? And you see, they are completely prepared. They understand how it works. What are those challenges that are associated, specifically entering into this function or entering into the industry or entering into, FMCG in general. They understand it much better. So yeah, I think they are in a much better shape than us.
And do you think society is more prepared for women leaders than it was?
For sure, Daniel. I think for sure. There's no doubt about it. I think it has come a long way. There's no doubt.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's good to hear. I think Christina and I, for a minute, we were a bit worried.
No, I'm sure you're going to tell me that actually it's leaps and bounds ahead.
It is, but let's note for everyone listening, there's still a lot of room to grow, a lot of progress to be made still.
Long way to go. Yep.
Yeah, well, we've had some controversial events happening in Spain in the last few weeks around the women's football national team, which have been very interesting to see how society's reacted to that. And Akanksha, with all the wealth of knowledge that you've gathered during your career, if you were to look back at the beginning and from what you've learned, you were to give yourself one piece of advice in hindsight, what would that be? I know there would be many, but it has to be one.
I think I might have answered this in some way already, but, I think I'll maybe do a bit more networking for sure, and I will be unabashedly myself, which I mentioned earlier. I adapted myself so much. I think those are a couple of things which I would do a bit more differently.
This was Akanksha Bindal from Pernod Ricard India. Christine, great conversation. What are your takeaways?
Well, it was definitely an interesting conversation. Apart from her very interesting journey that Akanksha has, I loved what she said when you asked her about what transitioning really is. And her approach was a little bit of a combination of things that we actively pursue and changes that are big in our lives, versus things that happen to us and perhaps we don't notice. So she mentioned that we're transitioning every 2 to 3 years and we either notice it and recognize it or not. And that's because also organizations change, and it's true that they evolve. You never enter the same river twice, I guess, but nowadays that river is flowing even faster. And so definitely love that part. And I think the takeaways on her tips on how to handle transitions were really good. So she mentioned that you need to start with the people, and definitely you're entering a new environment and you need to understand how people around you work, interact, the relationships and dynamics that exist. And that being the first point, I think it was a very strong one. Then she mentioned losing the baggage very quickly. And I did find that this is quite hard to do from the language and the jargon that you know. As you were mentioning at the beginning, the P&G lingo, you need to forget that somehow and start speaking the new lingo, and that's not easy, as well as things that you took for granted, like from infrastructure and data to routines, for example. Things are new. You just need to forget what you knew before and evolve. Then she mentioned about your own unique point, right? What is it that you bring? What is the value that you bring to that new company? And I feel that this transcends your previous role or the experience per se. It's more about how you've grown as an individual, as a professional, how much better you know yourself, and what can you do with it? How can you turn this into value to those around you? And I also liked a lot that you closed again with people and the power of network. And I remember we were having this conversation. I was telling you, through the world of startups, I realized how important actively pursuing to build a network is. And I couldn't stress that more.
Yeah, once you even recognize that that's kind of advice that you would give her younger self in terms of like developing her career. I think it was also interesting, and that's probably like something that leaves a door open for more thought and discussion in the future. The fact of transitioning in a world in transition, no, like it's like jumping on a train that's already running, right? So that's an
transition squared.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for boiling that down. Well, thanks, Christina, for joining me again, and also thanks for our listeners to listening in. Remember, you have a wealth of podcasts already available on this channel, also on the CPG guys, which are our counterparts on the other side of the Atlantic in the US, where Peter, Brian, and Shuri are creating great content twice a week. If you have any feedback, please reach out to us. You can do that through our website, through our LinkedIn. Open to positive, negative, and constructive feedback, whichever one you prefer. Have a great day and see you next week.